The last 10 years have been a really interesting and exciting journey, and it's not over yet for us. We're still on the way. We're not there yet, but it's very difficult when we're talking to other organisations who've seen that we've won various awards and we've had a lot of success in what we've been doing, to try and explain what's all the things we did, because we did a hell of a lot of things over the last 10 years and we're still doing them. But I think we could talk about the key categories that they fall into. And for me, the most important thing is to define what it is you stand for and to be able to have a vision of where it is you're going.
And the cultural strategy objective, which you can see here, is very clear in the sense of what we're trying to achieve. And what we've developed on the back of that objective is a range of initiatives designed to get us there.
An important part of defining what we stood for was it wasn't just about the board or the executive team or the managing director. It really was the whole leadership team who got together, and the whole organisation, to align to what it was we wanted to be in the future. Part of being able to define what it is you want to stand for is taking a stand. And that takes, for me, generosity and bravery, mostly of the executive team, but certainly of others throughout the organisation. You have to be able to take that stand, to know where it is you're going to, and to be willing to stand up and be counted. And if you're going to take a back seat on this kind of stuff, it's just not going to make a difference across your organisation. So I think for us, building the executive relationships and being a really solid team together and being totally committed to the vision that we were creating really made a difference. It was visible across the organisation. It was seen in every part of the organisation. You know, an example, going back in time, was the managing director. First thing he did was he tore down the wall of his office so that he was open and visible to staff.
And even, you know, exposing our own vulnerabilities, I guess, to the organisation. And there's many examples where, you know, as leaders, you know, we've admitted that we've made mistakes, and I think that's really important to show that human side to the leadership, but also the fact that we don't have all the answers and we don't pretend to be having all the answers. So we're all in this together.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and our MD, Tony, is really great at doing that. He shares with the whole company how he's feeling about things. He shares his vulnerabilities, he shares his angst about different things, and it means that we operate almost like a large family in a way, it feels like sometimes, because we are open with each other and we do share how we're feeling and what we're doing and where we're going on a very human level. An example of that as well is that every new member of staff that starts at Yarra Valley Water goes through an induction day, a welcome day, and as part of that they meet the executive team for lunch, and each of us talks about our roles and who we are, not just about what we do in our roles, but who we are as people, where we live, what kids we've got, what we're into, what our hobbies are. And I think it makes a difference across the organisation where people know who we are and what we value and what we stand for. So that first component of defining what you stand for is really important. Of course, the next part of that is communicating what you stand for, which is also what we've been talking about.
And you also, I mean, not only in terms of communicating, but it's reinforcing what we stand for through the things that we do as well. So it's not just a matter of, you know, saying to people, this is what we're all about, but it's then following up and taking action, for instance, when behaviours are inconsistent with the desired behaviour set of the organisation.
And also in all the policies and processes. So it's very important to us. We spent a lot of time making sure that our reward and recognition process recognises what it is that we say we stand for, and that the policies of the company reflect what we say we stand for. And I think that's evident throughout the organisation, and it's taken us probably some years to make all those changes. For a simple example is delegation. If we're saying that we trust our managers and we've educated and improved and developed our managers, then we need to be able to trust them to use the company's funds to do what they need to do without putting bureaucracy in the place where we have to all sign off on everything. So we did a lot of delegation across the company that freed up our time and gave more empowerment to where it needed to be in the line, where they could make decisions as they were working and not have to go back up the line to us.
Yeah, I mean, in many respects it's sort of, you know, this concept of tight, loose, tight management, where we're very tight and involved in the strategic direction and what we're trying to achieve, but fairly loose in terms of, you know, allowing people to show how to achieve that outcome or to innovate in their own way to achieve that outcome within obviously certain boundaries and constraints. But then very tight again on the follow-up in terms of getting the results and measuring, are we getting the results? Be it, asset performance, environmental performance, customer service.
Yeah, as we said before, we do hold our managers very accountable. We have a process that we call PEP Talks, which is our performance effectiveness process. And that very clearly defines what each person in the company, every single person in the company is accountable for. It also goes through a process of conversations with their manager about how their role contributes to the strategy, what they're responsible for, what their behaviours are, what their competencies are, what development needs they have, and so on. And it also has an element to it of what we call Manager One Removed, which is a process of interviews that happens for each person every year, where they have a directed interview with their Manager One Removed, which is mostly about their career and their long-term succession in the company, but also about how they're going and what they're seeing around the business. And that reminds me as well of something else that our MD does that's very important, is that he holds an open sort of morning tea once a month for about 6 to 10 staff who can volunteer to come. And he has an open conversation with them about how they're going and what they're doing.
It's almost like a mini focus group where he gets insights on what's really happening on the ground of the organisation, and quite often he'll come back to our executive team meetings and he'll start to join up the dots in terms of these conversations that he's having and say, I think we've got an issue here in this particular part of the business or on this particular policy.
Yeah, he starts to see the trends. And what's terrific, and really a reflection, I think, of the culture of the company, but also of his personal style, I guess, is that the staff from ground floor up actually open up to him, and they're very honest with him about how they're feeling, about what's happening, what's going on in their part of the organisation. I think they're very happy that their MD is actually interested in what they're doing. And so this investment of time, I guess, is what we're talking about in terms of what we stand for and communicating that. It's evident to the staff, I think, and certainly that's what's showing up in all our surveys, that what we are saying we stand for is what we actually do and how we behave ourselves and what we expect of them.
Yeah. Another way that manifests itself is in the lack of silos in the organisation. So, we're very strong with our executive team that we collaborate, we work together, we all own the results. The way we're enumerated even in terms of our
it's a team plan.
is very much about the team outputs. And, it even goes through to the fact that, right across the organisation we have a lot of people who rotate in senior roles from group to group.
You're one of them.
I was one of them, yes. I've been in finance, information technology, customer service, operational roles, marketing roles, economic regulation and strategy. So, I probably had at least 10 senior manager roles before I became a general manager, and this is my second general manager role at Yarra Valley. And I know Tony, managing director, I think he might have had 3 general manager roles moving from group to group before he became the boss.
If I think of our billing and customer service general manager, he started in finance and then in a senior role and moved into metering, to manage metering for a while. Then he managed an major IT project to replace our billing system, and now he's managing the customer part of the business. So we do rotate at general manager level, at senior manager level, and right down. We have a very strong rotation program for our engineers. So we move people around the organisation. We do also have a lot of cross-functional teams.
Well, I think the moving around the organisation really does support this cross-functional, more than cooperation, cross-functional teamwork, because, you could actually end up getting the results of something that you planned in a different role, and you end up being the recipient of that particular policy or system or process or whatever. But
that's right.
So that moving around the business, not only does people's knowledge of the organisation improve, but the relationships get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's all on the back of the cultural foundation work, I guess, that we've done.
And that's really part of the next lever, if you like, that we use within the organisation. So, define what you stand for, communicate what you stand for, and the next part of it is build the capability, and that rotation is part of building the capability. And we talked before about the investment we have in leadership, and we also invest in our staff. So we have very strong staff development programs where we're not just concentrating on their skills, their capability within their role, but it's very much about personal development, and we've had all staff going through a number of cultural programs and behavioural programs to help them understand what we're about and to grow on a personal level as well.
Beyond building the capability, clearly not all the organisations on the same page or at the same level of performance at any point in time. And, you know, the context changes for people. A system might have been introduced that, you know, people are having difficulty using. There might be people management issues where someone's been promoted to a leadership role and they're struggling. And those sorts of things. So one of the things that we're clearly focused on is looking for what we call hotspots in the organisation where our support is required. Support in terms of, you know, the executive team being aware that there's issues in a particular area of the business, and helping the local leadership resolve that one way or another, and through, you know, support and focus. But really being in tune, yeah, with what's happening on the ground and taking action to address those hotspots so that they don't, I guess, fester. And, you know, I mean, we want to take responsibility for lifting up the performance of the entire organisation. So there's just no point in having, you know, one group where people are starring, but another group where people are really struggling because of workload issues, because of morale issues or whatever. So we're very much focused on being in tune with that and taking action.
Yeah, supporting the hotspots in the organisation is really, really important. You can't take your eye off the ball. You can't assume because you're getting great results in general across the organisation that there's not some part of the organisation that doesn't need your help and your support. So we've talked about define what you stand for, communicate what you stand for, build your capability, support your hotspots. The next part for me is measuring your progress. You know, what gets measured gets done. Set your targets, measure your progress, make your plans, and that's very important to us too, and we've talked about some of the ways in which we measure our progress. And the last part, which is really important to me, is to embed the improvements. So by that, what we're talking about is you don't just tick the box and say we've done that, we've got this result. You actually have to make sure that your systems and your processes, the rules of the company are updated to make sure that any positive change has actually been embedded. And you don't forget about the areas that are working well. You know, when sometimes people can get survey results, they concentrate on what they're not doing well in. You have to do that, obviously, but you also have to take time and effort to make sure that what you are doing well in continues to do well. You can't take your foot off the accelerator. So with everything we've done, what's the things that have really made a difference for us? Pat?
Well, the first one I'd suggest is the reward and recognition process. Every month we have the whole company together on a Friday at the close of business, get together and recognise Employee of the Month and Team of the Month, and also our Safety Champion of the Month. And it's a very relaxed atmosphere, and there is a little bit of banter and, you know, quite a friendly, relaxed environment where people just get to unwind, but also celebrate and recognise, you know, people who've done a good job. And I just think with anyone who ever comes to one of those events, they sort of walk out of the room and go, wow, that was a really good feeling in the room.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about the overall openness about the company, the sharing of results, the sharing of who we are as people, the things that we've done in different events. You know, we have a kick-off event every year, which the whole company comes to, and we look at our past successes over the year and our future direction for the next year. People are involved in things greatly. We have a fantastic internal comms program, and almost every day there's a story up there about a staff member, about what they've achieved or what they've done. It means that we start to get a real human factor going through the organisation. People know who their colleagues are. They start to understand what they do. We had open days. I remember open days that we did a number of years ago. It was just fantastic, where each area had a very, very small budget to creatively present to the rest of the organisation what they did, and we had some really creative displays that happened there. And then more recently, we've had the strategy days.
Yes, yes, and essentially the same thing, where people who are working on, say, our environmental strategy will they'll get a room assigned, you know, rather large room, and people from the rest of the organisation can come in as visitors and hear all about what we're doing in a strategic sense to get better results in the environment, be it about the rivers, be it about our sewage treatment plants, whatever, but or greenhouse gas.
And the great thing about that is it's cross-functional teams that does it. So it's not, it doesn't sit in a particular area. People volunteer to be part of getting this day together. And this year we've got 4 days, you know, based on our strategy that we've already talked about. So we have our green day, red day, blue day and yellow day. We've had our green day and red day already, and they were extremely successful. There was a lot of fun, a lot of interest, a lot of learning, a lot of laughing. And our blue day is coming up soon, so we're really looking forward to what's going to happen in the display of what our culture's all about. What else, Pat?
Well, you know, I think one of the other things that really stands out, and quite often for me, it's brought home by my interactions with my colleagues outside of Yarra Valley Water, with other water utilities in Melbourne, or our government stakeholders, and that is the way we directly communicate. So there is candour in what we do, and no withholding. So I think that, you know, you mentioned previously about generosity, and there's a generosity in communication that, you know, the average Yarra Valley Water manager is equipped with to not be concerned too much about looking good or looking, you know, how looking bad, but just to be direct in what they're communicating and understand, you know, why am I feeling this way about this particular issue, and to express that in a way that gets the message across. And I think quite often some of our colleagues in the industry can get taken a little bit aback by the fact that we'll just say, this is how we feel. And
actually, I think you've hit the nail on the head. We've done a lot of things, a lot of programs, a lot of development, a lot of you know, different innovative initiatives across the company, but the work that we've done to develop people in the company in terms of who they are being, I think has probably been the key to this whole thing. And what you described there, I think, was very, very true. That withholding, for example, you know, so that our people are very open and honest and very candid about, in a very constructive way. They're not trying to look good in front of anyone else. They're there for the betterment of whatever it is they're working on, not just to make it look good for themselves or to make themselves look like the winner. They really do work on, we've got a couple of things that we talk about in the organisation. One is on the court in the stands, and in the stands, as you can imagine, if you think about a football field or whatever, that when you're in the stands and you're telling everyone in the game how to operate and what they should be doing and what they could be doing, it really doesn't make any effect on the game. We talk to our people about being on the court, actually being in the game for the event of actually getting a result. For whatever it is, not being in the stands with opinions and views, and I think that relates into gossip. We took a really strong stand on gossip in the company and holding people accountable for what they were saying in the kitchens or in the corridors. And although that was a little bit confronting at first, it's now starting to become a habit in the organisation, and those conversations are becoming much, much more constructive.
Yeah, and you know, we'll remind ourselves in any, you know, meeting, for instance, that you can get mired into, you know, going down sort of, you know, rabbit burrows and the like, and getting a bit distracted, and that happens the world over, I'm sure. But, you know, what is my contribution to this conversation that's going to move the issue forward? And you know, and
we hold each other accountable for that, because at all different meetings, not just the exec meetings, you might hear someone saying, "Are you on the court?" And they're immediately brought back to mind of what's the purpose of why we're here and how are we going to achieve the best result from this meeting or this workshop or whatever. We also address our rackets. So we talk quite openly where we find that we've got something that's not working for us in the organisation. We look at ourselves. We look in the mirror and try to look at, why is this so? Why is this continuing to be a complaint for me? What is it that's going wrong here? And we hope that we take accountability when something's going wrong, rather than pointing the finger and trying to point the blame at someone else.
Yeah, and I think that really, again, a good example of that is for managers and working with their staff. So, you know, sometimes people who lead people might say, well, you know, Joe over there has got an attitude problem. They're not performing, and they're not motivated. And we would ask our manager to, well, look in the mirror and say, you know, what am I as the manager contributing to the fact that, you know, Joe isn't performing? And then you start to focus on the actual environment within which Joe's operating. And, you know, is Joe in the right job that matches his capabilities and the things that he values? Am I, as a manager, adding value to what Joe does? Is Joe clear on the tasks that I'm giving him? So you start to look in the mirror and start to see, well, actually, there's a lot of things that I can take responsibility for the fact that Joe over there isn't actually getting good results.
At the end of the day, a manager hires the staff, they delegate the work to the staff, they structure their area, they are responsible for the communications within that team, they're responsible for making sure people know, they have clarity around what it is they're supposed to do. So at the end of the day, if something's not working, it really is the accountability of the manager. And we do believe that quite strongly, and it can be a shock for some managers perhaps when they come into the organisation, but we do give them every support so that they can start to build their capability in being accountable for the integration of the work of their team and the outcomes for their team.
You know, let's be clear, you know, this is not just about having a great place to work, but, you know, I mean, the why we want it to be a great place to work is to get results and for everyone to be fulfilled. Yeah. And, you know, when I talk about results, I'm talking about financial results, you know, customer service results, environmental improvements, you know.
Shareholder return.
Shareholder return. So all of those things, you know, are really important. They're underpinned by the place being, you know, having a high-performing culture.